Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back for another exciting lesson of Ableton Online. This is Lesson 7, Live Concepts. So in this lesson, we're going to be getting into some of the unique features and characteristics of Ableton that make it such a powerhouse for production. One of the first and most glaringly obvious of those unique features is the fact that Ableton, unlike a lot of other DAWs, doesn't just have a linear composition timeline. So you're not regulated, or relegated, I should say, to composing and producing and being creative in a linear left to right fashion like a lot of other DAWs out there. Ableton offers you session view as well as arrangement view. So you have a choice as to which is more suited for the task at hand. Now, a quick point about session view and arrangement view here is that they are completely autonomous of each other. And what I mean by that is that I could be playing back a composition from session view like this one. And I could have, in theory, a completely different composition going in arrangement view. So even though all of my tracks here are named the same, I could drag in completely different loops, MIDI clips, whatever. I'm just literally pulling in just random stuff here just to prove a point. And now if I just give this back to arrangement button a click here, so again, sounds absolutely nothing like what I have going in the arrangement. So, like I said, in theory, you could have two completely different compositions going within the same session, one in either view. That probably isn't the most worthwhile use of session and arrangement view, but it is possible. The main point to take away from this is that Ableton offers you something that a lot of other DAWs don't. It offers you a non-linear composition and production strategy or style. And what does that mean? Well, that means that I could, I'm just alt dragging these down to make a copy of each one of these clips. As a matter of fact, there's a fast way to do this. I'm just going to click the first one, shift click the last one, hit Command D to duplicate them out. And let's say all of these were different variations of the same clip within each track. So each one of these was a little bit more or less built out than the previous. So what Ableton allows me to do is, in a nonlinear fashion, just kind of jam these out. So I can click any of these at any time, and they don't have to correlate at all. That's huge. That's groundbreaking. That allows you to just kind of jam out different parts, different segments, different clip variations, and allows you to get really musical without being tied, once again, to this linear timetable in which if I wanted to play all of these that are highlighted now, I'd have to, click and drag them out individually. You get the point. I think you're starting to see what I'm talking about here. Not only that, but notice the discrepancy in the lengths of the loops, okay? So in a linear view, again, if I just click this button, it will bring the playback back to this window entirely. If I wanted these to loop out correctly, I'd have to go in here and loop each one of these. I'm just hitting Command D. And again, you can highlight anything in Ableton and hit Command D to duplicate it. I would have to go through and manually do that, either by duplicating the loop or by actually looping all of these out within my loop bound, okay? it becomes a tedious process. Whereas when I am playing these out of session view, Ableton will intelligently know the length of each loop and loop each one of them accordingly so that everything stays in sync. So this is a 16 bar loop that's being looped out, okay? This is a 4 bar loop. Actually, excuse me, this is a 1 bar loop. Every one of these numbers on the right here corresponds to a measure within a bar. So 4 counts would be a bar. Let me make sure I'm right there. Yeah, length, 1 bar, okay? So just divide this number by 4. So this is a 4 bar loop, okay? This is a 4 bar loop right here. This is a 2 bar loop, okay? So each time this loop plays through, this loop will play through twice. And this loop will play through 4 times, okay? So, but Ableton is doing all of this in the background for you and keeping your entire session in sync so that you can just kind of rock out and have a good time and jam and focus on the musical ideas and not focus on the technicalities of getting all of this lined and locked up. And there are many uses of this which we'll get into in future lessons, but for now, the thing to take away from this is that session view auto loops clips and loops of different lengths automatically, which takes all of the guesswork out of keeping things in time or looped out correctly on your own. Session view also allows you to experiment with layering out different clips and clip variations in a completely customizable, on the fly, and fun sort of organized chaos sort of way. So it's a bit of a hurdle to get over the first time. I know I struggled with this coming from another DAW, but it's a lot of fun just to be able to click around, or if you have a controller, just be able to hit some pads and just get a beat going, make some different variations, program them in, and then just go for it. It becomes more musical, and Ableton becomes more like an instrument and less like a piece of software. So each one of these horizontal rows is seen here. I can trigger every clip in the scene, okay, in this horizontal row just by clicking this one play button, or boom, each clip has a stop button associated with it, which, by the way, you can remove here. So if I wanted this drum loop to keep going, okay, after everything else had stopped, boom. Let's do it for this one too so it's more pronounced. You can remove the stop button and that clip will keep playing. So get familiar with clips, get familiar with the scenes. I know it looks a bit like Tetris when you start off, but give it a go. Have some fun with it. It really does open up the mind in a different way. And music is all about what's coming out of the speakers anyway. It's all about what you're hearing. Nobody's going to look at your session and say, wow, that must be a great record. They're going to hear what's coming out of the speakers and make a decision based on that. So what I've noticed is that some people seem to gravitate towards the familiarity of a linear left to right. It's right in front of my face kind of vantage point that arrangement view offers, especially starting off. So there's no harm and there's no shame in starting an arrangement view if that's what you feel more comfortable with. And hey, even if you're not going to take my advice and become comfortable in session view and start off in session view when you're starting off in Ableton, there is no harm in, I'm just going to grab some of these really quick. There's no harm in starting in arrangement view. Just make sure that whichever view you're in that you're using the other view as a sonic palette to test and mold ideas that you can then drop back into your primary work view. So what do I mean by that? I mean, let's say I've got this little Vox loop right here, but I want to make a variation of it, okay? I'm gonna delete these clips right here. I'm gonna drop that in, make sure it's on the right track, okay? I'm gonna get rid of some of this other stuff to prove my point here. So I got nothing else on the track, okay? I'm outside of my loop bound. I'm even gonna drag it over here just to make sure. So I've got the original copy here, okay? And I wanna make a variation of it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to edit some stuff out here. And I'm just gonna make it just a random little, edit on this, and just kind of give it some variation here. I'm not really too concerned with what this is gonna sound like right now. I'm more just kind of doing this to show you how, even if you are working out of session view, for instance, make a duplicate of that. And if I give this a Command J, I've got a new 4-bar region, which I can then drag and drop into session view. So now I've got this variation and this one. And what I'll usually do is a ridge and one. And now I've got a variation. So now got that variation, and I've got this variation. So I'm working out of session view and orchestrating out of session view, but I'm using arrangement view as a testing ground, as a sonic palette, if you will, as a slicing and dicing board for ideas that I can then drag back into my arrangement. So another really key underlying concept and construct of Ableton Live, really what the program became famous for and kind of built its reputation on, is its warping engine. What is warping? Warping is Ableton's algorithmic analysis of loops and samples and pretty much anything you throw at it that has a rhythmic quality in terms of musical content. And looking at that and saying, okay, I'm going to take an educated guess at the BPM based on transients and based on melodic content and based on harmonic and rhythmic content, and take that BPM and whatever the BPM of that segment or that clip is, I'm going to try and fit it into Ableton's master BPM, Ableton's grid. So Ableton's warping engine really has allowed the speed of your workflow within Ableton to become incredibly fast due to the fact that you can audition potential loops and samples in real time right from the browser, regardless of the original sample or loop BPM. So just to give you an example here, we've got this playing out here, this loop. I'm just gonna go down here and see. So I'm at 125. I'm gonna see something in 140, 45. So I've got my song BPM, my session BPM at 125, and this sample that's at 145 is playing back in perfect time. Not only that, but it's a little bit loud right now. The fact that I can just kind of turn this down and get the cue that assigns over here, that corresponds, I should say, over here, to the cue, the audition playback, the preview playback. See, that sounds a lot more leveled in with my mix. So it's not only the fact that I can hear in real time BPM warped, stretched into the BPM of my track, any sample, any loop, any other sonic content, but it's the fact with, might I add, pretty strikingly high accuracy. Every once in a while it doesn't get it quite right, but on the whole it's pretty accurate. But I can also listen at a comparable volume so that I'm almost mixing in a potential sample to see if it'll sit right in my mix. That's huge. It speeds up your workflow immensely. So one more of the very major underlying constructs of Ableton is the global quantize. So if you can think of Ableton as a perfectly aligned clock, and that clock is represented by a visual grid. And on or around this grid is where every piece of audio or MIDI will be measured against. So to put that in another way, if you think of, let's say this is a bar right here. Within that bar, I can see 16, there's 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. So there's 16 parts to this bar, okay? These are 16 grid lines within this specific bar, and that's just the resolution I have set right now in my view. This loop is being measured using these warp markers. Ableton's going to take a guess at what the BPM of this loop is, and it guessed that it was at 126, and it has aligned this vocal loop, okay, to my master BPM, my master grid, my master clock, that perfectly aligned clock in Ableton. So even though this segment is at 126, okay, if I play it back, and let's throw the BPM way down, 110. As long as my sample's warped, okay, I can do some pretty dramatic BPM changes in my master BPM. And my warped loop, my warped sample will stay perfectly in time with Ableton's grid, Ableton's perfectly aligned clock. So Live's warping engine takes subtle cues from audio loops and direct cues from MIDI loops to align almost all content seamlessly to this global quantized master grid, which is set by you in the top left corner as your global BPM. I'm going to go back and drop this down to 124. I was feeling that groove there. Global quantize as defined by Ableton in their info view, which by the way, you can get to at any time by hitting Shift ? If you have a question, where would you hit? You'd hit the question mark. So Shift/ would get you the question mark. You can highlight over anything and it'll give you an explanation as to what you're hovering over in the bottom left here. So tempo, right? Your master tempo. Your global quantize is defined by Ableton as a quantization that is used to avoid rhythmical error when playing clips. But to really understand the 3 main functions of global quantize, you kind of have to mess around with the variations of it, the different bar and measure variations of it, to really understand what it's doing. So to break it down, let's say I want to work on rule of 8, which is going to be an 8-bar loop for what I'm working on. If I have my global quantize set to 1 bar, that means if I click to start this loop up, within a loop, within a bar of the next loop, if I click to start this scene up, every scene or every clip or every sound that I launch, whether it be a clip from here, notice how that changed right on 1 bar, okay? That changed right on 1 bar as well, okay? If I add a new loop over here, 3, 2, 3, 2. So you can see that everything's changing within a bar of when I'm hitting it, okay? Or when I'm queuing it up, when I'm selecting it. If I went to 2 bars now, okay, and hit scene 2, for instance, it would take 2 bars to change. So 39 would start now, and it'll go to 41, 3, 2, 1, and change. If I go to 8 bars, I have 8 bars before the next major 8-bar section change. So if you think 1 to 9, 9 to 17, 17 to 25, 25 to 33. So I'm starting on 33. If I play 1 and then instantly play 2, the next change that will trigger scene 2 will happen at bar 41. So watch. 1, I'm going to instantly cue 2. So I'm going to sit here and wait. 35, 36, 37, and I'm going to go right back to 3 on 41 and watch it change to 49. 3, 2, 1, it's going to change right now. Now I'm going to hit this one, and it's going to change at 49. 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 3, 2, 1, and change. So global quantize, very, very useful, both in auditioning clips, auditioning scenes, and especially when trying to find loops, one-shots, and samples from your browser window, okay? When composing a beat, I highly recommend you start at 1 bar. The quick key for that is Command 9. As you work your way through your session, you might find that 2 bars and even on up to 4 bars and 8 bars is a lot more handy because you don't have to be so quick on the draw to cue up the next scene within, if you're on within a bar of bar 8, you want to change over at bar 8, you have to hit it between bar 7 and bar 8, but you don't want to wait 4 bars or 8 bars when you're trying to find a new sample from the browser. You just want to kind of flip through those, but you don't want them to be on a half bar. So starting with a bar is a great place to start. Bump it up to 2 bars or 8 bars if you feel comfortable with that. And that's in essence how global quantize works. So we'll get into how to use that more to your advantage in building out your beats in a future session. For now, those are some of the main live concepts that it's good to come to grips with, get a handle on, and really understand the underlying constructs and principles by which Ableton operates. That was lesson 7. Thanks for joining us. See you in lesson 8.